God's people were miraculously delivered from Egypt and journeyed through the wilderness for 40 years. Their leader Moses died, and now his successor Joshua was ready to claim the promised land. The Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give them. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you." The first city in the promised land that needed to be conquered was Jericho. It was a fortified city of about 8 acres. It had a wall all around the city 7 feet wide and 13 feet high. Some estimates give even bigger dimensions. It has been estimated that anywhere from 400 to 3,000 people lived in that city. Joshua secretly sent 2 spies into Jericho to look over the city. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king heard about their presence in the city and knew they were spies. Rahab was ordered by the king to turn over the 2 men, but instead she hid them on her roof under stalks of flax. That night, Rahab had a conversation with Joshua's 2 spies, and she declared, "I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and great fear has fallen on us all. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and your other victories along the way. When we heard it, our hearts melted because of you, for the Lord your God is God, in heaven above and on the earth below. Now please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my family, and that you will save us from death." "Our lives for your lives," the men assured her. "If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. The men said, "Keep this scarlet rope in your window, and when we attack, all inside the house will be safe." The men returned to Joshua and told him everything that had happened. They said, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." Shortly thereafter, Joshua was near Jericho and looked up and saw an angel who identified himself as the commander of the army of the Lord. He reminded Joshua of God's holiness and commanded him to take off his sandals and worship God. Joshua was reminded that day of who God was and that he would be fighting this battle for Israel. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua and said, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men." Then he proceeded to give Joshua the battle plan. Joshua and the Israelites followed God's 7-day battle plan exactly. Once a day for the first 6 days, they marched around the city wall, led by 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets. The Ark of the Covenant was carried right behind, and the armed guards marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the Ark. All this time, the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the people, "Don't give a war cry, don't raise your voices, don't say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout." On the 7th day, they circled the city the same as before, but they circled it 7 times that day. On the 7th time around, when the priests sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." When the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the people gave a loud shout, the walls collapsed. So every man charged straight in, and they took the city. They destroyed every living thing in the city and brought the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. Everyone was instructed not to take anything for themselves because this city was devoted to God. Rahab and her family were saved that day and lived with Israel from that day forward. The story of her life was rewritten, and Jesus became one of her descendants years later. We are told that the Lord was with Joshua and his fame spread throughout the land. And the Israelites, they were on their way to conquering the land that God had promised them 40 years before.